today we're going to be talking about a topic that we hear a lot in our Facebook group and with our families that we support. It's on ADHD and criticism. So we know, right, that our children with ADHD are feeling much more critiqued and have a much more heightened sense of criticism. Many parents feel like they are walking on eggshells when they're around their kids, and this is especially true once they hit their preteen or teen years. You will see that your child will, um, you know, feel like they're little prickly pears sometimes. And I hate to use that phrase, but that is sometimes how it feels because it's like you can't really say anything to them without them, quote unquote, overreacting to something. But we'll talk more about why that's not really an overreaction for them. Um, so, rather than trying to, anytime you feel like you correct or give some sort of feedback, you're going to see them pretty much lash out and go from 0 to 100 really quickly. So ADHD, we know, often also comes with rejection sensitivity. And there are several articles online. We are not the experts in that, but if this is where they need therapeutic support for that. But I do feel that that is because children with ADHD are much more likely to be in trouble, to be corrected. And so when a child gets that a ton of times, right, their pathways in their brain, the neural connections are always looking out for threat. They're worried about threat. And so things that may feel just as simple, gentle feedback will not feel very gentle to them, and they hear something very differently. So understanding what's happening beneath the surface helps to reduce conflict between you and them and also builds trust and helps you approach them in a much more compassionate way. We know that back to school, as this season is, there's a lot of worries around it for kids on how they're going to manage their schoolwork. They don't want to go back, the transitions and kind of the busyness and the chaos of it all. So you may see more emotional outbursts. And so we want to provide and give you some tools to help your child cope during these times and also help them get set up and help them transition to school in a much more positive, peaceful way. So we talked about rejection sensitivity dysmorphia. It's also known as RSD attitude, which is a website primarily focusing on ADHD support, has several articles that you can Google about RSD. But RSD is basically an extreme emotional sensitivity to perceived, and I say that that's the key word here, perceived criticism, rejection, or disapproval that could be real or imagined. And so again, it is a extreme emotional sensitivity to this. Children with RSD can go from being very calm to tearful, that defensive, very angry, often lash out. So they become really reactive because their amygdala has taken over in seconds when they feel they're being corrected, they're being rejected, they're given feedback, etc. So you will see this a lot in school and at home. I often see this a lot with our students. So anytime a teacher, especially if it's at the start of the year, corrects a child, we often see that that child will have a negative perception of that teacher that carries on the rest of the school year, right? So if your child has ADHD and you feel like they are pretty sensitive when it comes to any feedback, please share this with your teachers so that they give your child much more positive praises and reinforcements at the start of the year so that when they do provide that feedback, it is received in a much more gentler way. Dr. William Dodson, a psychiatrist in ADHD, has called RSD one of the most impairing aspects of ADHD because it affects relationships, school performance, and self-esteem, which is so true, right? So again, they are very reactive, and it doesn't feel good for them. Their nervous system is always pretty riled up, and so it's affecting their relationships overall, friendships, household, etc. So an example of how RSD can show up is if your child you remind your child to fix a mistake on the homework and they immediately tear up and say, I'm just so dumb. I can't do anything right. Even though you were very gentle and encouraging in the way you did remind them, right? So they go from 0 to 100, and you'll notice that throughout this live, they are using very extreme language. I never do anything right. I'm so dumb, right? So they're identifying themselves with labeling themselves. And also, I'm can't do anything right, right? So very extreme language. And so what that does is it creates a reality for them in their brain. Like their brain starts believing, I can't do anything right. And so that is something I have seen with people who have ADHD, with adults and kids. The vocabulary that's used is always pretty extreme. You never do it right. Always do this. You always say it's very extreme. There's no middle ground. So criticism often feels like threat for these kids and not feedback for them. So the ADHD, we know processes information differently. What feels to you like could be helpful guidance feels like very personal failure to them, right? And so again, I believe, and I have not read the research behind this, but I do feel like it is because they are constantly being corrected, and so they're expecting to be corrected, and their brain is always on the lookout for threats. When your child hears criticism, their amygdala, so one of them, the emotional part of the brain, it's the brain's area of detecting danger, can go into overdrive, right? And it's triggering a flight, fight, or freeze response to everything that they hear. So they get flooded pretty quickly. So even if you give them a very simple, gentle feedback, they're flooded, right? And so that is why we see them react, and we believe that they are overreacting, but to them, it feels very big. So an example is you can say, please don't leave your shoes in the hallway, and your child snaps at you. You always think everything I do is wrong. And again, please notice the extreme language that's being used here. So in that moment, your child is truly not able to calmly reflect and take that feedback in a gentle way. They react from a very emotional, flooded state, and again, using that extreme language. So kids with ADHD often struggle with behavior, separating behavior from their identity, right? We see this a lot. They label themselves. And so they have a weaker working memory, which is their ability to process, manipulate, and hold on to information simultaneously. And that affects their self talk, their reflection, their ability to remember consequences and to talk themselves through something. So it makes it harder for them to think, reflect objectively, right? And to think about your perception of things and where you're coming from. So simple correction, like you telling them you forgot to brush your teeth, can be internalized as I am so bad, or I always mess up for them. So they may, again, they're really internalizing things and labeling themselves and talking in extreme vocabulary. They often also deflect, right, or blame others, and this is their way of protecting themselves. But underneath that behavior, there's a deep fear of failure, not being good enough, and a lot of shame tied to every quote feedback that they are getting. Again, your tone always matters. So the way the feedback is delivered is really important. So you can say the feedback as, you forgot to put your shoes away, or, oh, you forgot to put your shoes away, right? So both ways, you're likely going to get a reaction, not a response, a reaction, but one will be received a little gentler than the other. Neuroscience shows that connection is a prerequisite for learning and for feedback to be received well, right? So we always want to connect before we correct. So when your child feels safe and supported, they're better able to receive guidance. And again, if you know the child you have, if you feel like any of this could be helpful to share with your teacher, please let them know. Your warm tone, your eye contact, and curiosity-based language is going to help your child stay open instead of shutting down, right? So rather than, you forgot to fix a mistake, you could say, and what step is left to what's the last step you always do in your homework before you pack it, right? So again, curiosity based questions and open-ended questions will help them to problem solve and reflect. um, Again, so instead of, another example could be, instead of how could you forget your science book again, you can try saying, I know that book is easy to miss and it's really hard to pack sometimes when we're in a rush. What's one thing you could do to help you remember to pack your book tomorrow, right? So again, these are some coaching tips we're sharing with you here. Avoid shame-based phrases like "you never listen," and again, extreme language, "what's wrong with you?" Your child's going to feel like they're being attacked and unsafe, and you're not going to get the response that you are hoping for. So think of yourself as a coach in helping your child build these skills, and not a referee calling out every mistake, right? So we want to focus on the big picture, focus on what's really going to move the needle when you guys are providing that feedback. All right. I hope this was super helpful for you. I did go through it pretty quickly. If you have a child with ADHD and you're noticing that, the stress, academic performance and starting the school year always is a bit bumpy and it's a bit stressful for you and for them, please schedule a call with us at WeThriveLearning.com. I would love to chat with you and learn more about how we can support your child to help relieve some of that stress, teach them how to access their curriculum, their learning, teach them some skills that will help them in and out of school, help them to develop independence, autonomy, and to feel competent when approaching their schoolwork, and teach them how to advocate for themselves, and also stress tolerance.